The scent of ash and silver still clung to Mira's hair when she slipped through the servants' entrance of Blackstone Palace, a scent that marked her as prey in a world ruled by predators. Hey, beautiful souls. Before we dive into this tale of secrets, danger, and a love that could shatter kingdoms, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. And how are you doing today? I hope you're ready for a story that's going to grab your heart and refuse to let go. If you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button because trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now, let's step into Mira's world, where one mistake could cost her everything. Mira's hands trembled as she adjusted the rough linen apron she'd stolen from a clothesline 2 villages back. The fabric scratched against her collarbone, a constant reminder that she didn't belong here. That she'd never belonged anywhere. The kitchen entrance yawned before her like the mouth of a beast, stone archway slick with evening mist, torchlight flickering against walls built thick enough to withstand siege warfare. Blackstone Palace. The heart of the northern Lycan territories. The one place a girl like her should never, ever enter. But desperation had teeth sharper than fear. She'd been running for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the night her village burned. 3 weeks since she'd watched her mother shove her toward the forest edge with blood-slicked hands and eyes that held too many secrets. 3 weeks since she'd felt the dormant thing inside her chest stir for the first time, a power that hummed beneath her ribs like a second heartbeat, dangerous and wrong. Run, her mother had whispered. Run and never let them know what you are. So Mira ran. And ran. Until her shoes fell apart and her stomach folded in on itself, and the coin purse she'd grabbed contained nothing but lint and broken promises. The kitchens were her last option. Servants were invisible. Servants were safe. Servants didn't get hunted. She stepped through the entrance, forcing her spine straight even as every instinct screamed at her to turn back. The heat hit her first, massive stone ovens blazing against the far wall, their flames painting dancing shadows across vaulted ceilings. Then came the noise, the clatter of copper pots, the sharp bark of orders, the sizzle of meat on iron skillets. No one noticed her. Not yet. Mira's wolf sense, weak as it was for an omega, prickled with awareness. The palace thrummed with power. She could feel it in the stones beneath her feet, taste it in the air thick with roasted herbs and something else. Something wild and barely contained. Lycan Lords didn't just live here. They ruled here. And their dominance saturated every corner of this place like blood soaked into soil. You. The voice cracked through the kitchen chaos like a whip. Mira's heart stopped. A woman materialized from the steam, tall, sharp-featured, with iron-gray hair pulled so tight it seemed to stretch her skin. The head cook, Mira guessed. The woman's eyes swept over her with the precision of someone who'd spent decades identifying problems. You're the new girl? The cook's tone suggested she already knew the answer and found it wanting. Mira's mouth went dry. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected anyone to be expecting someone. But desperation made liars of honest women, and she'd learned to lie very, very well over the past 3 weeks. Yes, ma'am. Her voice came out steady. A small miracle. I was told to report to the kitchens this evening. The cook's nostrils flared slightly. Could she smell the lie? Mira's pulse hammered against her throat, but she held the woman's gaze. Submissive enough to seem harmless. Confident enough to seem confident. A calculation flickered behind the cook's eyes. Then she grunted. Fine. Gods know we need the hands. The spring hunt starts in 3 days and Lord Darius wants a feast that'll make the other territories weep with envy. She thrust a basket at Mira's chest. Pantry. 3rd level down. Fetch me 2 dozen eggs, a wheel of the aged white cheese, and fresh thyme. Don't take all night. Mira caught the basket, relief flooding her limbs so fast she felt dizzy. Yes, ma'am. She turned before the cook could reconsider, navigating through the organized chaos of the kitchen. Servants moved around her like schools of fish, swift, synchronized, barely acknowledging her presence. Perfect. The pantry stairs spiraled down into cool darkness. Mira's footsteps echoed against stone as she descended, torchlight growing sparse. First level, dried goods and grain sacks stacked like small fortresses. Second level, barrels of salted meat and fish, their briny scent sharp in her nose. Third level. She froze. The air changed. Thickened. Mira's breath caught as her weak omega senses suddenly screamed in warning. Power. Raw, overwhelming, suffocating power rolling through the corridor ahead like invisible smoke. Her skin prickled. The dormant thing in her chest, the forbidden power she'd spent her whole life suppressing, stirred. No. Not now. Not here. She pressed it down until her ribs ached with the effort. But the other presence didn't fade. It grew stronger. Closer. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Moving through the darkness toward her with predatory grace. Mira's fingers tightened on the basket handle. Every instinct she possessed shrieked at her to run, but her legs locked. Because running from an apex predator only triggered the chase. And whatever was walking toward her through the shadows was very much an apex predator. A figure emerged from the darkness. Tall. Powerfully built. Shoulders that blocked the torchlight and cast her in shadow. He moved like violence contained in human skin, each step controlled, but promising devastation. Dark hair fell across a face carved from brutal angles and unforgiving lines. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Gold. Pure molten gold, with a ring of silver around the pupils that marked him as royalty among Lycans. Lord Darius. The Lycan Lord of the Northern Territories. The male whose reputation preceded him like the scent of blood before a storm. They said he'd killed his first challenger at 13. They said his wolf was touched by ancient magic, unstable and violent. They said he'd once torn apart an entire raiding party single-handedly when they'd threatened his borders. They said a lot of things about Darius Blackstone. None of them good. All of them terrifying. And Mira, dressed in stolen servant's clothes, hiding a forbidden power, lying about everything including her name, was standing directly in his path. His nostrils flared. Those gold eyes locked onto her with such sudden intensity that Mira actually stumbled back a step. The basket nearly slipped from her grip. Something flashed across his face. Confusion. Then shock. Then something else entirely, something primal and possessive that made her blood run cold and hot simultaneously. His lips parted. His breathing changed, deepening. And Mira realized with creeping horror what was happening. He was scenting her. Who? His voice came out rough, almost guttural. He took a step toward her. Then another. His gaze swept over her face like he was memorizing every detail, every curve, every flaw. Who are you? Run. She needed to run. But her legs wouldn't obey. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced herself to meet those burning gold eyes even as terror clawed up her spine. I'm from the kitchens, my lord. I was sent to fetch supplies. It wasn't technically a lie. Not completely. But the way he stared at her, like she was a puzzle that had just rearranged itself into an impossible solution, told her he knew she was hiding something. His hand lifted, reached toward her face. Mira's breath stopped. And then a voice shattered the moment. Lord Darius. A guard appeared at the top of the stairs, breathing hard. The emissary from the Eastern Territories has arrived. He demands an immediate audience. Darius's jaw clenched. His hand hovered in the air between them for one more heartbeat, fingers trembling slightly. Then he dropped it. But he didn't look away from her. What's your name? It wasn't a request. Mira's mind raced. Mira, my lord. The truth. A mistake. She'd meant to give a false name, but it slipped out before she could stop it. Mira. He repeated it slowly, like tasting wine. Like claiming ownership of the syllables. Then his eyes narrowed. You're new. Yes, my lord. Why haven't I seen you before? Because I broke into your palace 3 minutes ago. Because I'm not supposed to exist. Because if you knew what I really am, you'd execute me in the courtyard before dawn. I've only just arrived, my lord. The guard cleared his throat urgently. My lord, the emissary. I heard you. Darius's voice cut like a blade, but his eyes never left Mira's face. The intensity in them made her feel naked despite being fully clothed. Exposed. Seen. Finally, he stepped back. But the movement seemed to cost him effort, like he was physically forcing himself away from her. Go, he said quietly. Dangerously. Fetch what you came for. Mira's legs unlocked. She moved past him, careful not to brush against his body even though the corridor forced them close. His heat radiated against her side. His scent pine and smoke and something wild wrapped around her like a living thing. She made it 3 steps before his voice stopped her. Mira. She turned. Looked back. He stood silhouetted against the torchlight, a figure carved from shadow and barely leashed power. And the expression on his face sent ice and fire racing through her veins in equal measure. Hunger. Recognition. Confusion. And something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Stay away from the lower levels after dark, he said. It's not safe for servants. Then he was gone, disappearing up the stairs with the guard, leaving Mira alone in the cool darkness with her racing heart and the horrible, certain knowledge that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because Lord Darius hadn't looked at her like a servant. He'd looked at her like prey. Or worse, like salvation. Mira didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Not with the memory of those gold eyes burning through her every time she closed her own. Not with the way her skin still tingled where his gaze had touched her. Not with the dormant power in her chest humming like it recognized something in him, something that called to the forbidden magic she'd spent 22 years pretending didn't exist. The servants' quarters were cramped but mercifully anonymous. Narrow bunks stacked 3 high, rough wool blankets, and the constant sound of breathing bodies pressed too close together. Mira had claimed an empty bunk in the corner, as far from the others as possible. She'd learned early that invisibility was survival. But even surrounded by sleeping servants, she felt exposed. Seen. The way Darius had looked at her in that corridor, like he could peel back her skin and read every secret written on her bones, haunted her. Stay away from the lower levels after dark. A warning. Or a threat. Maybe both. Mira rolled onto her side, staring at the rough stone wall inches from her face. Her mother's last words echoed in her mind, as they had every night since the fire. You're different, Mira. Special. That's why they'll hunt you if they ever find out what you truly are. What am I, Mama? Mira had asked, watching flames devour their cottage while her mother's blood soaked into the dirt. Forbidden, her mother had whispered. The last of a bloodline the Lycan court tried to erase centuries ago. Your power, it shouldn't exist. They'll kill you for it. Or worse, they'll use you. Then her mother had died, and Mira had run, and now she was sleeping in the palace of the most dangerous Lycan Lord in the Northern Territories while pretending to be something she wasn't. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant planning. You're the new girl. Mira jerked upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. A face appeared over the edge of her bunk, young, round-cheeked, with curious hazel eyes and a mass of copper curls barely contained by a servant's cap. Sorry, the girl whispered, wincing. Didn't mean to scare you. I'm Lily. I work in the scullery, but sometimes they pull me for serving duty when we're short-staffed. She grinned. Which is basically always. Lord Darius doesn't throw small parties. Mira's pulse slowly settled. Lily seemed harmless, cheerful in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. Still, Mira kept her expression neutral. Friendly enough to avoid suspicion. Distant enough to discourage real connection. Mira, she said quietly. Kitchen assistant. Oh, you got assigned to old Margot? She's tough but fair. Just don't burn the bread and you'll be fine. Lily swung herself onto the bunk across from Mira's with practiced ease. How long have you been at the palace? Just arrived yesterday. Where from? South. Vague. Untraceable. My family's farm failed. Needed work. It was the story she'd rehearsed 100 times during her 3-week flight. Simple. Sad enough to discourage follow-up questions. Common enough to blend in with a dozen other servants' backgrounds. Lily's expression softened with sympathy. I'm sorry. That's rough. But honestly, you lucked out getting placed here. The pay's decent, the food's good, we actually get to eat what the nobles eat, just after they're done, and Lord Darius doesn't. Well. She paused, lowering her voice even further. He doesn't take liberties with the staff, if you know what I mean. Some of the noble houses, the lords think servants are just another privilege. But not him. He barely even notices we exist, honestly. Treats us like furniture. Something twisted in Mira's chest at that. He barely notices we exist. Except he'd noticed her. He'd stared at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Like she was a mystery that might drive him mad if he couldn't solve it. That's good, Mira managed. Right? Lily grinned. I mean, he's terrifying. Don't get me wrong. I've seen him lose his temper exactly once in the 2 years I've worked here, and I thought the whole palace was going to collapse from the sheer fury rolling off him. His wolf is supposedly unstable, something about ancient bloodline magic that makes him more beast than man when he shifts. But as long as you stay out of his way and do your job, you're golden. Stay out of his way. Excellent advice. Mira fully intended to follow it. The spring hunt feast is in 3 days, Lily continued, apparently delighted to have a new audience. It's a huge deal. All the neighboring Lycan Lords come to Blackstone to compete. There's this tradition where they hunt in wolf form through the northern forest, and whoever brings back the biggest game wins Lord Darius's favor for the season. It's basically a giant political flex, but the feast afterward is incredible. We'll be working nonstop, but the energy is amazing. Mira's stomach sank. Neighboring Lycan Lords. Political gatherings. More eyes on the palace, more chances for someone to recognize what she was, or worse, to trigger the power sleeping inside her chest. She needed to leave. Soon. Before the feast. Before Lord Darius decided to investigate the strange servant girl who smelled wrong and made his wolf react in ways servants shouldn't. But she also needed money. Food. Time to plan her next move. Just a few more days. She could survive a few more days. You okay? Lily asked, studying her with sudden concern. You look pale. I'm fine. Just tired. Right, sorry. I talk too much. My sister always says I could chat the ears off a stone statue. Lily grinned, but there was genuine warmth in it. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Margot's already planning the menu, and when she's in planning mode, she turns into a 5-foot-tall tyrant. Lily disappeared back to her own bunk, and the servants' quarters settled back into the soft sounds of sleep. But Mira lay awake, staring at shadows on the ceiling, and tried not to think about gold eyes and the way Darius had said her name. Like a claim. Like a promise. Like a threat wrapped in silk. The next morning arrived too quickly, dragging Mira from restless dreams into the pre-dawn chaos of palace kitchens. Margot, the iron-haired head cook, ran her domain like a general commanding troops. Orders flew through the steam and smoke. Chop, stir, taste, faster, cleaner, move. Mira kept her head down and her hands busy, grateful for work that left no room for thinking. She peeled potatoes until her fingers cramped. Scrubbed pots until her shoulders ached. Chopped herbs with mechanical precision while conversations flowed around her like water around stone. Invisible. Safe. Exactly what she needed. But 3 hours into her shift, Margot appeared at her elbow with a silver tray and an expression that made Mira's stomach drop. You. Margot thrust the tray at her. Lord Darius takes his breakfast in the Eastern Solarium. The usual girl is sick. You'll deliver it. Every cell in Mira's body screamed no. She swallowed hard. Perhaps someone more experienced. Everyone more experienced is busy preparing for the feast. Margot's tone left no room for argument. It's a breakfast tray, girl, not a state dinner. Put it on the table. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't stare. Don't linger. Simple. Simple. Right. Simple like walking into a dragon's den carrying raw meat. Mira's fingers closed around the tray handles. The silver felt cold against her palms, grounding her. Yes, ma'am. Margot's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Eastern wing. 3rd floor. The guards will direct you. And girl. She caught Mira's gaze. Lord Darius is intense. But he's fair. Just do your job and you'll be fine. Do your job. Stay invisible. Mira could do that. She'd been doing it her whole life. She navigated through corridors that grew progressively grander, rough stone giving way to polished marble, simple torches replaced by elaborate chandeliers. The air itself felt different here. Heavier with power. Saturated with the dominance of Lycans who ruled rather than served. 2 guards flanked massive oak doors. They barely glanced at her before pushing the doors open. The eastern solarium stole Mira's breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with morning light. Plants cascaded from hanging baskets, wild roses and jasmine, and something that smelled like moonlight given form. A table sat near the windows, already set with pristine white linens. And standing at the window, backlit by dawn, was Darius. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a white shirt open at the collar, but somehow looked more dangerous than he had in the shadows. Morning light caught the sharp planes of his face, the powerful lines of his shoulders, the barely contained violence in his stillness. He turned as she entered. Those gold eyes locked onto her immediately, and Mira's carefully constructed composure cracked. Because he looked at her the same way he had in the corridor. Like recognition. Like hunger. Like he'd been waiting for her. You, he said softly. And Mira realized with sinking certainty that staying invisible around Darius Blackstone was going to be absolutely impossible. Mira's hands didn't shake as she set the tray on the table. A small victory, considering her heart was trying to batter its way out of her chest. Your breakfast, my lord. Her voice came out steady. Professional. The perfect servant. She turned to leave. Stay. The single word froze her mid-step. Not a request. A command from a male who'd never learned to ask for anything because the world simply bent to his will. Mira turned back slowly, keeping her eyes downcast in the submissive posture expected of servants. My lord. Darius moved toward her with that predatory grace, each step deliberate, controlled, but promising violence if provoked. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that his scent wrapped around her again. Pine and smoke and wild things that had never been tamed. Look at me. Her throat constricted. Every instinct screamed that meeting his eyes was dangerous. That letting him see her, truly see her, would unravel everything. But disobedience would be worse. Mira lifted her gaze. The impact of those gold eyes hit her like physical force. Up close, she could see the silver ring around his pupils wasn't uniform. It fractured and swirled like storm clouds, marking him as descended from the original Lycan bloodlines. Ancient. Powerful. Lethal. Why do you smell like that? His voice dropped lower, rough with something that sounded almost like pain. Mira's blood turned to ice. My lord, I don't. Don't lie. He stepped closer. Too close. She could feel the heat radiating off his skin now, could see the tension coiling through his muscles like he was physically restraining himself from. What? Your scent. It's wrong. Not wrong. He shook his head sharply, frustration flashing across his features. Different. I can't place it. Can't categorize it. And it's driving my wolf insane. The dormant power in her chest stirred, responding to his proximity. To the raw dominance pouring off him in waves. Mira shoved it down desperately, but her hands trembled now. Small tremors she couldn't quite control. I'm just a servant, my lord. I don't know what you mean. His jaw clenched. You're lying again. I'm not. I can hear your heartbeat. His eyes tracked to her throat, watching her pulse hammer against her skin. I can smell your fear. But underneath it, his hand lifted, fingers hovering near her face without quite touching. Underneath it is something else entirely. Something that makes no sense. He was too close. Too intense. And the power inside her was waking up, unfurling like something that had been sleeping too long and resented being contained. No. Not now. Please not now. My lord, I should return to the kitchens. Why did you come here? The question cut through her attempt to flee. To Blackstone Palace. Why? Because I'm running. Because my mother died protecting a secret I don't fully understand. Because the Lycan court wants people like me dead, and you're part of that court, and if you knew the truth you'd execute me yourself. I needed work, Mira said instead. The kitchens were hiring. The kitchens weren't hiring. His eyes narrowed. I would know. I approve all new staff personally for security reasons. Her stomach dropped. Of course he did. Of course the one palace she'd chosen to hide in would be run by a lord paranoid enough to personally vet servants. There must have been a miscommunication. Who told you to come here? His voice sharpened with suspicion. Who sent you? No one sent me. Are you a spy? He moved closer still, crowding her against the table. Did one of the Eastern Territories plant you here? Is this about the border disputes? What? No. The accusation was so unexpected that genuine shock bled through her carefully maintained composure. I'm not a spy. I'm not working for anyone. She stopped, took a breath, met his eyes with as much honesty as she dared. I just needed somewhere safe to disappear for a while. The raw truth in those words seemed to catch him off guard. His expression shifted, suspicion giving way to something more complicated. His hand finally dropped, but he didn't step back. Safe from what? From you. From the court. From what I am. From my past, she said quietly. For a long moment, they stood there in the morning light streaming through the solarium windows. Close enough that Mira could see gold flecks in the silver of his eyes. Close enough that she could feel the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. Then his expression shuddered. Closed. He stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. You're right, he said, his tone gone cold and formal. You should return to the kitchens. Relief and something that felt disturbingly like disappointment flooded through her. Mira dipped into a quick bow. A crash shattered the moment. The solarium doors burst open. A guard stumbled in, his face pale, uniform torn. Blood streaked down his arm. My lord. The guard dropped to one knee, gasping. The northern border. We've been breached. Every trace of the conflicted male disappeared. Darius transformed in an instant, shoulders squaring, expression going hard and deadly, power rolling off him in suffocating waves. How many? His voice could have cut steel. At least 40. Rogues, we think. But they're organized. Armed. They knew exactly where to hit. The guard's voice shook. They're heading toward the village settlements. Captain Thorne is holding them off, but he's calling for reinforcement. He says. The guard swallowed hard. He says these aren't normal rogues, my lord. They're hunting for something specific. Mira's blood ran cold. Hunting for something specific. No. It couldn't be. She'd been so careful. She'd covered her tracks, changed her appearance, suppressed her scent. Darius's eyes cut to her with sudden, terrible focus. And Mira saw the exact moment he made a connection. The exact moment suspicion crystallized into dangerous certainty. You. His voice went soft. Lethal. What are they hunting for? I don't know. Don't. He moved toward her with the focused intent of a predator closing in for the kill. Don't lie to me again. Not about this. Those rogues are heading toward my territory. Toward villages full of families and children. So tell me right now, what are they looking for? The power in her chest surged, responding to his dominance, to the threat in his voice, to the raw fear flooding her system. Mira felt it pushing against her ribs like something alive. Like something that wanted out. I don't, her voice cracked. Please, I don't. My lord. Another guard appeared, this one covered in soot and ash. The rogues have split into 3 groups. One is definitely heading toward the palace. They'll reach the outer walls within the hour. Darius snarled, an actual, inhuman sound that made every window in the solarium rattle. His eyes flashed pure silver. The beast inside him rising to the surface, barely contained by human skin. Then he turned back to Mira, and the look on his face made her want to run and never stop. You're coming with me. His hand closed around her wrist, not painfully, but with unbreakable strength. If those rogues are here for you, you're going to help me stop them. And if you're lying. His thumb pressed against her racing pulse. If you're lying, I'll find out. And whatever you're running from will seem like a pleasant dream compared to what I'll do. He dragged her toward the door, already barking orders to the guards. Plans for defense. Strategies for attack. The ruthless Lycan Lord doing what he did best, protecting his territory with absolute, merciless efficiency. But Mira barely heard any of it. Because she knew, with horrible, certain clarity, that the rogues weren't just hunting near Blackstone Palace. They were hunting her. And in less than an hour, the secret she'd spent 3 weeks running from was going to explode in the worst possible place, with the most dangerous possible witness. The dormant power in her chest pulsed like a second heartbeat, recognizing the approach of something that had been hunting it for centuries. And for the first time since her mother died, Mira wondered if running had ever really been an option at all. Or if she'd just been delaying the inevitable. The palace transformed into organized chaos within minutes. Darius dragged Mira through corridors that suddenly swarmed with warriors, Lycans in various states of armor, weapons gleaming, eyes flashing silver as their wolves rose to the surface in preparation for battle. The air crackled with predatory energy so thick Mira could barely breathe through it. His grip on her wrist never loosened. My lord, please, she tried again as he hauled her down a narrow stairwell carved from ancient stone. Save your breath. His voice was granite. No warmth. No mercy. The male who'd looked at her with confused hunger in the solarium had vanished, replaced by the ruthless lord whose reputation made entire territories go silent with fear. You're going to tell me everything. But first, you're going somewhere secure where those rogues can't reach you if they breach the walls. Secure. He meant locked up. Panic clawed up Mira's throat. Being trapped, being caged, was worse than running. At least running gave her options. Freedom. A chance to escape before the power inside her fully woke and revealed exactly what she was. They reached a heavy iron door. Darius shoved it open, revealing a small chamber carved into the bedrock beneath the palace. Sparse furnishings, a cot, a table, a single narrow window set high in the wall that let in a sliver of daylight. A cell. Not a dungeon, but close enough. Stay here. He finally released her wrist, and Mira resisted the urge to rub the skin he'd held. It tingled where he touched her, warm and electric and wrong. Don't try to leave. There are guards posted at every exit, and if you run, they have orders to assume you're hostile. I'm not your enemy, Mira said desperately. I swear. Then prove it. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gold eyes stole her breath. Tell me why rogues are attacking my territory. Tell me what you're running from. Tell me why your scent makes my wolf want to. He stopped, jaw clenching, like he'd almost said something he couldn't take back. Want to what? The question slipped out before Mira could stop it. His eyes flashed silver. Nothing you need to worry about. But the way he looked at her, like she was simultaneously a threat and something precious he needed to protect, told a different story. Confusion warred with suspicion on his features. Anger battled with something softer, more dangerous. Attraction. Recognition. The beginning of something neither of them wanted but couldn't seem to stop. I don't know why they're here, Mira said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Not technically a lie. She knew what they were hunting for: her bloodline, her power, but not why now. Not why 40 rogues would risk attacking a Lycan Lord stronghold. I didn't bring this to your doorstep intentionally. You have to believe that. I don't have to believe anything. But uncertainty flickered through his expression. Like he wanted to believe her despite every tactical instinct telling him not to. Stay here. I'll deal with the rogues. Then we're having a very long conversation about who you really are. He moved toward the door. Wait. Mira grabbed his arm without thinking. The contact sent electricity racing up her fingers. Darius went absolutely still, his entire body tensing like she'd pressed a blade to his throat. Slowly, so slowly, he looked down at where her hand gripped his forearm. Don't. His voice came out hoarse. Strained. Don't touch me right now. Why not? His eyes snapped to hers, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Hunger. Raw, barely leashed hunger that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with the way his gaze dropped to her mouth for just a fraction of a second before jerking away. Because my wolf is already unstable, he said quietly. Dangerously. And your touch makes it worse. Makes me want to, again. He stopped himself. Pulled away from her grip with visible effort. Just stay here. Please. The please surprised her. Broke through his commanding exterior to reveal something almost vulnerable underneath. Then he was gone, the iron door slamming shut behind him. A lock clicked into place. Mira stood frozen in the center of the small chamber, her hand still tingling from where she'd touched him, her heart racing from the look in his eyes. What am I doing? She should be planning escape routes. Checking the window for weaknesses. Preparing to run the moment the battle provided enough distraction. Instead, she pressed her palm against the door and whispered, "Be careful." To the male who might execute her if he learned the truth. To the Lycan Lord whose wolf recognized something in her that shouldn't exist. To the one person in this entire palace who looked at her like she mattered, even when he was furious and suspicious and confused. I'm so stupid, Mira thought. So incredibly stupid. The battle sounds started 20 minutes later. Mira heard them through the narrow window, distant at first, then closer. Snarls and howls. The clash of steel. Roars that shook dust from the stone ceiling. Her weak Omega senses couldn't tell her much, but she didn't need enhanced perception to know the fighting was brutal. She paced the small chamber like a caged animal, every instinct screaming at her to do something. Help somehow. But what could she do? She was nobody. Weak. Powerless except for the forbidden magic sleeping in her chest that she couldn't control and didn't understand. You're different, Mira. Special. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Your power, it shouldn't exist. They'll kill you for it. Or worse, they'll use you. Then what good is it? Mira whispered to the empty room. What's the point of having power if I can't even use it to protect? She stopped. Protect who? Not herself. She'd been running from self-preservation for 3 weeks. But the thought of Darius out there fighting rogues who'd come because of her, dying because of her, made something crack open in her chest. The dormant power stirred. Stronger this time. Insistent. Like it had been waiting for her to finally want something more than survival. Like it had been waiting for her to care. A massive explosion rocked the palace. Stone dust rained down. The narrow window cracked, spiderwebbing across the glass. Mira's hands clenched into fists. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against the iron. Footsteps thundered past outside. Voices shouted orders. Someone screamed. Then silence. The kind of silence that made her skin crawl. The lock clicked. Mira jerked back as the door swung open. But it wasn't Darius standing in the doorway. It was a man she'd never seen before, tall, scarred, with eyes that glowed an unnatural red. Rogue markings carved into his exposed arms. And behind him, 3 more rogues, all wearing the same expression. They'd found her. There you are, the scarred man said, his voice a rasp that sounded like gravel grinding against bone. The little Omega who thinks she can hide from destiny. He smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. Our master has been looking for you for a very, very long time. And now, he stepped into the chamber, his companions flanking him. Now you're going to come with us. One way or another. Mira's back hit the far wall. No escape. No options. The power in her chest surged like a living thing, responding to her terror, to the threat, to the desperate need to survive. And for the first time in her life, Mira stopped fighting it. She let it rise. Light exploded from Mira's body. Not fire. Not lightning. Something else entirely pure, silver light that poured from her skin like moonlight given physical form. It filled the chamber, blinding and beautiful and utterly impossible. The rogues shrieked, stumbling back as the light seared their skin like acid. Mira gasped, dropping to her knees as power she'd suppressed for 22 years finally broke free. It burned through her veins, wild and uncontrolled, responding to her terror with devastating force. The scarred rogue threw his arm across his eyes. Grab her. Before the light pulsed, expanded, and suddenly Mira could feel them. Not just see them, feel their life force, their heartbeats, the corrupt magic that had twisted them into rogues. The power inside her recognized that corruption, rejected it, wanted to purge it. No, Mira gasped. She pressed her hands against the stone floor, trying desperately to pull the power back. No, no, no. But it wouldn't listen. It surged outward like a wave, crashing into the rogues with purifying force. They screamed. Actually screamed as the silver light wrapped around them, burning away the corrupt magic that sustained their rogue forms. Mira watched in horror as the unnatural red glow faded from their eyes, as the carved markings on their skin dissolved like ink in water. The scarred man collapsed, convulsing. What are you? I don't know. The truth ripped from Mira's throat. I don't know what I am. Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Multiple sets, running fast. The silver light flickered, responding to Mira's panic. She was losing control. Could feel it slipping through her mental grip like water through her fingers. The door burst open. Darius filled the doorway, covered in blood that wasn't his own, eyes blazing pure silver. He took in the scene with predatory speed, the rogues writhing on the floor, the silver light pouring from Mira's body, her terrified face. Their eyes met. And everything stopped. The power inside Mira recognized him, surged toward him like iron to a magnet. Like it had been waiting centuries for this exact moment. For him. The silver light wrapped around Darius before Mira could stop it. No. She tried to pull it back, terrified it would hurt him the way it had hurt the rogues. Please, I can't. But instead of screaming, instead of burning, Darius went utterly still. His eyes widened. The silver in them flared brighter, responding to her light, merging with it. And Mira felt everything. His wolf. Ancient and powerful and barely contained. She felt its rage, its loneliness, the curse that had been eating at him since birth. Unstable magic that made him more beast than man, that drove other Lycans away, that isolated him even among his own kind. She felt his confusion. The way her scent had driven him half-mad because his wolf recognized something his human mind couldn't comprehend. She felt his hunger. Not just physical, though that was there too, raw and overwhelming, but deeper. The hunger for someone who could understand. Who could see him as more than a weapon. Who could touch him without fear. And underneath it all, she felt the curse. Dark magic wrapped around his wolf like chains, corrupting it, twisting it. Ancient and malevolent. Someone had done this to him. To his entire bloodline. Without thinking, acting on pure instinct, Mira's power reached toward that darkness. And began to unravel it. Darius gasped, his knees buckling. He caught himself against the doorframe, his entire body shaking. What are you doing? I don't know, Mira whispered. But she couldn't stop. Her power had found something broken and was trying desperately to fix it. Recognizing I'm sorry, I don't know how to control it. Don't. His voice came out rough, strained. His hand reached toward her, trembling. Don't stop. The vulnerability in those two words shattered something in Mira's chest. The silver light intensified, flowing between them like a bridge. She felt his wolf settle. Calm. The unstable rage that had plagued him his entire life easing for the first time in decades. And Darius felt it too. She could see it on his face, the shock, the relief, the desperate hope he was trying not to show. "You're a lunar priest," he breathed. "You're an actual, living lunar priest." The words hit Mira like a physical blow. A what? The bloodline the Lycan court tried to exterminate 300 years ago. Darius moved toward her slowly, like approaching something wild and precious. They could heal curses, purify corrupt. Instead, for the first time since her mother died, Mira felt something that almost resembled safety. Even if it was the most dangerous safety imaginable. "The court will come for me," she whispered. "Let them." Darius's smile was all teeth and promise. "I've been looking for an excuse to go to war with those corrupt bastards anyway." The War Council convened within the hour. Mira sat in a chair far too large for her, surrounded by Lycan lords and warriors whose combined dominance made the air feel thick as tar. Darius had insisted she attend, not as a servant, but as the reason they were preparing for conflict. As the living secret that could tear the Lycan court apart. She'd never felt more exposed in her life. "You're telling us that girl is a lunar priest?" Lord Thorn, Darius's second-in-command, stared at Mira like she was a ghost. "That's impossible. The bloodline was exterminated centuries ago." "Clearly not." Darius stood at the head of the table, still covered in dried blood from the battle, looking every inch the Ruthless Lord his reputation promised. "I felt her power myself. It's real. And someone knows about it. The question is who?" A female warrior, Captain Sarah, according to the introductions Mira had barely processed, leaned forward. "Organizing a rogue attack of that magnitude requires resources. Influence. This wasn't some random band of outcasts." "Agreed." Darius's jaw clenched. "Which means we're dealing with someone inside the court structure. Someone with enough power to command rogues and enough knowledge to know what Mira is." The use of her name, not servant, not girl, but Mira, sent warmth through her chest despite the terror. "My lord." An older warrior spoke up, his scarred face grave. "With respect, harboring a lunar priest is treason against the court. The moment they discover she's here, they'll demand her surrender. And if you refuse..." "I'm already refusing." Darius's voice could have cut diamond. "This isn't a debate." "Then it's war." Lord Thorn's expression showed no judgment, only calculation. "The court won't let this stand. They'll brand you a traitor. Turn the other territories against you. You'll lose everything you've built. I'm aware of the consequences. Are you?" Sarah's gaze flicked to Mira, then back to Darius. "Forgive me, my lord, but you've known this girl for less than 2 days. Is she truly worth starting a war that could destroy the northern territories?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Mira's throat constricted. Because Sarah was right. This was insane. Darius barely knew her. She was nobody, a runaway Omega with power she couldn't control and a target painted on her back. She opened her mouth to say so. To tell them she'd leave. Disappear. Let them blame her death on the rogues and move on. Yes. Darius's single word silenced the entire room. He looked directly at Mira, his gold eyes burning with something that stole her breath. "She's worth it." The certainty in his voice terrified her more than the rogue attack had. "My lord," Thorn began. "The court is corrupt." Darius's attention snapped back to his commanders. "They've used dark magic to maintain power for centuries. Murdered an entire bloodline to protect their secrets. And now they're hunting Mira because her very existence threatens to expose them." His hands braced against the table, dominance rolling off him in suffocating waves. "This war was always coming. She's just given me a reason to start it on my terms." A reason. As if Mira was justification for something he'd wanted to do all along. The council dissolved into strategic planning, supply lines, allied territories, defensive positions. Mira listened with growing horror as they calmly discussed preparations for a conflict that would cost thousands of lives. Because of her. Because she'd been stupid enough to think she could hide in the one place that would make her the most visible. The council finally ended near midnight. Darius dismissed his commanders, but his hand caught Mira's wrist before she could slip away. Come with me. It wasn't a request. He led her through torchlit corridors to chambers she hadn't seen before, his private quarters, she realized. Massive and austere, decorated with weapons and maps rather than luxury. A warrior space. The moment the door closed, Darius's composure cracked. You were going to offer to leave. Not a question. An accusation. I saw it on your face in the council. You should let me. Mira pulled her wrist free, wrapping her arms around herself. Those commanders are right. This is insane. You can't start a war for someone you barely know. I know enough. He moved closer, and Mira's back hit the wall. I know your power calms my wolf when nothing else ever has. I know your scent drives me half mad because my instincts recognize what my mind took too long to understand. I know. He stopped, jaw clenching, like the next words cost him something. I know that for the first time in my life, I want to protect something more than I want to destroy my enemies. And that terrifies me more than any war ever could. The raw honesty in his voice cracked something open in Mira's chest. Why? Why do you care what happens to me? Because you're mine. The words came out rough. Possessive. My wolf recognized it the moment I scented you in that corridor. You're my... He cut himself off again. But Mira heard the unspoken word anyway. Mate. The biological bond that tied Lycan souls together. Rare. Permanent. Undeniable. No, she shook her head, panic rising. That's not possible. I'm an Omega. You're a Lord. The bond doesn't work across that kind of power gap. It does when one half of the bond is a lunar priest. Darius's hand came up, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. Your bloodline was created to balance the most powerful Lycan lines. To heal them. Stabilize them. That's why the court feared you. Because lunar priests could bond with alphas other Lycans couldn't touch. Mira's world tilted. You're saying we're... fated. His thumb brushed her lower lip, and electricity raced down her spine. Whether we want it or not. The truth of it hummed between them, undeniable, terrifying, absolutely impossible to ignore. I can't. Mira's voice broke. I can't let you sacrifice everything for a bond neither of us chose. The rest of her protest died as Darius kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and claiming and full of 3 centuries of loneliness finally finding its answer. His hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss with a growl that vibrated through her entire body. And Mira, God's help her, kissed him back. Her power surged, wrapping around them both. She felt his wolf rise to meet it, no longer violent but protective. Hungry. Right in a way that bypassed logic entirely. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darius pressed his forehead against hers. You're not leaving, he whispered. I won't let you. Mira wanted to argue. Wanted to be smart and selfless and do the right thing. But the bond hummed between them like a living thing, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she wasn't alone. Even if staying meant war. Even if staying meant death. Even if staying meant loving a male she barely knew but somehow understood completely. Okay, she breathed. I'll stay. The relief that flooded his expression was worth whatever came next. The attack came 3 hours before dawn. Not rogues this time. Court enforcers. The Lycan Court's elite assassins, wearing black armor and carrying weapons designed to kill other Lycans. They breached the palace walls with terrifying efficiency, heading straight for Darius's chambers. Heading straight for Mira. Mira woke to the sound of shattering glass. She bolted upright in Darius's bed, where she'd fallen asleep hours ago, exhausted from the emotional upheaval, just as he lunged across the room. His body shifted mid-leap, bones cracking and reforming with supernatural speed. A massive black wolf landed where Darius had been, lips peeled back in a snarl that shook the walls. 3 enforcers crashed through the window in a spray of glass and moonlight. Mira screamed. The lead enforcer's eyes locked onto her with predatory focus. Target acquired. Subdue and extract. Darius's wolf hit him like a battering ram. Blood sprayed. The enforcer's words cut off in a gurgling choke as massive jaws closed around his throat. The other 2 attacked simultaneously, blades flashing in the darkness. Mira scrambled backward against the headboard, her power surging in response to her terror. Silver light flickered across her skin, illuminating the carnage unfolding in the bedroom. Darius fought with brutal efficiency, all fang and claw and devastating violence. But these weren't rogues. Enforcers were trained specifically to kill powerful Lycans. Their weapons gleamed with dark magic, designed to wound even in wolf form. One blade caught Darius across the shoulder. He roared, the sound half human, half beast. Pain and rage flooded through the mate bond, hitting Mira like a physical blow. She felt his agony, his fury, his desperate need to protect her even as blood matted his dark fur. No, not him. Not because of me. The power inside Mira exploded outward. Silver light filled the room like a supernova, so bright the enforcers screamed and threw their arms across their eyes. But Mira wasn't trying to hurt them. She was trying to reach Darius. Her power wrapped around his wolf, flowing into the wound on his shoulder. She felt the dark magic from the blade trying to spread, corrupt poison. And just like with the curse, her lunar priest power recognized the corruption and attacked it. The wound sealed. The dark magic burned away. Darius's wolf turned to stare at her with molten gold eyes full of shock and something that looked like reverence. Then he spun back to the enforcers and absolutely destroyed them. It was over in seconds. 3 elite killers reduced to broken bodies on blood-soaked carpet. Darius shifted back to human form, breathing hard, covered in gore that wasn't his own. "Are you hurt?" His voice came out hoarse as he crossed to her in 3 strides. His hands ran over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with frantic intensity. "Did they touch you? Did any of them?" "I'm fine." Mira caught his hands, stilling them. "I'm fine. But your shoulder. You healed it." Wonder bled through his voice. He looked down at where the wound had been. Nothing remained but smooth skin and dried blood. "I felt you inside my head. Through the bond. You pulled the dark magic out like it was nothing." "I didn't know I could do that," Mira whispered. I felt you hurting and I couldn't." She broke off as tears suddenly blurred her vision. The adrenaline crash hit her all at once, leaving her shaking. Darius pulled her against his chest, seemingly unconcerned about the blood covering him. "You're safe. I've got you. You're safe." But they both knew it was a lie. The palace was in chaos by the time they emerged from the chambers. More enforcers had hit simultaneously across multiple entry points, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm defenses while the kill team went after Mira. 12 dead, 23 wounded. And the court's message was crystal clear: surrender the lunar priest or face annihilation. Darius stood in his war room, freshly cleaned and armed, staring at the formal declaration that had arrived with the enforcers. "Lord Darius Blackstone, you are hereby charged with treason against the Lycan court for harboring a forbidden bloodline. Surrender the criminal known as Mira within 48 hours or face the full military might of the United Territories. Your lands will be seized. Your title revoked. Your people scattered. This is your only warning." "They're not bluffing." Thorne's voice was grim. "The court has already sent word to the other lords. They're framing you as a traitor who's protecting an abomination. Half the territories will march against us out of fear alone. Let them." Darius's hands braced against the table, but Mira saw the tension coiling through his shoulders. The weight of impossible choices. "My lord." Sarah stepped forward, her expression conflicted. There may be another option. Everyone turned to look at her. The Eastern Territories have never fully aligned with the court. Lord Jareth in particular, he's been vocal about court corruption. If we could get word to him, convince him to stand with us, others might follow. It wouldn't be the entire court against us. It would be a civil war. Still a war, Thorn pointed out. But one we might actually win. Sarah's gaze flicked to Mira. Especially if we can prove what the court's been hiding. Why they really exterminated the lunar priests. Darius straightened slowly, calculation replacing desperation in his eyes. You want to expose them. I want to give the other territories a reason to question their loyalty. Sarah pulled out a map, spreading it across the table. The court maintains power through fear and tradition. But if we can prove they've been using dark magic, that they murdered an entire bloodline to hide their crimes, some lords will break rank. Not all, but enough. We'd need proof, Thorn said. Real evidence, not just accusations. The court archives. Darius's eyes gleamed. Every noble house maintains records going back centuries. If the lunar priest extermination was officially sanctioned, there will be documentation. Justifications. Evidence of the dark magic they were hiding. The archives are in the court's central fortress, Thorn said flatly. The most heavily guarded location in all the territories. Getting in would be suicide. Not if they're expecting us to defend our position here. Darius looked up, and Mira saw the ruthless strategist behind the protective mate. They think we'll fortify Blackstone and wait for their army. They're not expecting an offensive strike. Sarah's expression slowly shifted to understanding. You want to raid the court archives while they're mobilizing against us. I want to burn their lies to the ground. Darius's smile was all teeth. And I want every territory to see exactly what kind of monsters have been ruling them. The War Council erupted into planning, strike teams, diversions, timing. For the first time since the enforcers attacked, hope flickered in the room. But Mira felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Because she knew, with horrible certainty, that Darius wouldn't leave her behind. That he'd insist on keeping her close, protected, safe. And that his need to protect her might be the very thing that got him killed. She waited until the council dismissed. Until they were alone in the corridor outside the war room. I want to come with you. The words rushed out before she could reconsider. To the court archives. I want to help. Darius turned to her with immediate refusal written across his face. Absolutely not. You're staying here where I'm a target? Mira stepped closer, holding his burning gaze. Where every enforcer and assassin knows exactly where to find me. I'm safer with you than locked in a palace they've already breached once. His jaw clenched. If something happens to you, then it happens. She reached up, cupping his face the way he'd done to her hours ago. But I'm not sitting here helpless while you risk your life for me. I have power, Darius. Let me use it. Let me fight. She felt his resistance through the bond. Felt his every instinct screaming to lock her away somewhere safe. But she also felt something else. Respect. Pride. The reluctant acknowledgement that she was right. You stay by my side, he finally said. Every second. You don't leave my sight for any reason. Deal. He pulled her close, pressing a fierce kiss to her forehead. If you die because of this, I'm going to be extremely angry with you. Despite everything, Mira laughed. Noted. The court archives stood at the heart of enemy territory, a fortress within a fortress, protected by centuries of magic and paranoia. Darius's strike team moved through the shadows like ghosts. 12 warriors, handpicked for skill and absolute loyalty. And Mira, her power carefully suppressed, dressed in black and terrified but determined. They'd infiltrated during a shift change, using intelligence Sarah had gathered from sympathetic guards. The court was mobilizing for war, their attention focused outward on crushing Blackstone territory. They never expected the threat to come from within. 2 guards ahead, Thorn whispered from the front. Changing positions in 30 seconds. Darius's hand tightened briefly on Mira's, a wordless reassurance through the bond, then released. He moved with deadly silence, taking down the first guard before the man could cry out. Thorn handled the second with equal efficiency. They stepped over the bodies and descended deeper into the fortress. The archives materialized like something from a nightmare, vast halls carved from black stone, lined with thousands of scrolls and books protected by preservation spells. The air tasted of old magic and older secrets. "Split up," Darius ordered quietly. "We're looking for anything dated around the lunar priest extermination. 300 years ago, plus or minus a decade. Move fast. We have maybe 20 minutes before patrol routes cross this section." The team dispersed into the darkness, leaving Mira with Darius and Thorn as they navigated deeper into the archives. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain every guard in the fortress could hear it. "Here." Darius stopped before a section marked with faded gold lettering. "Bloodline records. Restricted." Restricted meant protected. His hand glowed with alpha power as he touched the magical seal, forcing it to recognize his authority as a Lycan Lord. The barrier shimmered and dissolved. Inside, the records were meticulous, terrifyingly organized. Every noble bloodline documented in excruciating detail: marriages, births, deaths, executions. Mira's hands trembled as she pulled scroll after scroll, scanning for anything about lunar priests. "Got something." Thorn's voice was barely audible. He held up a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Personal diary of Court Magistrate Cornelius." Dated. He squinted at the inscription. 287 years ago. Darius crossed to him in 2 strides. Together they read, and with each line, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "The lunar priests grow too powerful. Lord Marcellus's curse was lifted today by the young priestess Elena. He walks without pain for the first time in decades. The court fears what this means. If the priests can undo our carefully crafted dark magic, the spells that bind certain bloodlines to our service, the curses that keep rebellious lords in check, we lose our greatest weapon, control through fear. The decision has been made. The lunar priest bloodline must be eliminated. Completely. Not a single child can survive to inherit their gifts. We will frame it as heresy, as corruption. The other territories will believe because they fear what they don't understand." Gods. Thorn's face had gone pale. They murdered an entire bloodline because the priests could expose their control mechanisms. "Keep reading," Darius growled. The operation was successful. 43 lunar priests executed across all territories. Their homes burned. Their children. The court has decreed that any record of their healing gifts be destroyed. History will remember them as dark practitioners, as threats, not as the healers they truly were. Lord Marcellus protests. Says the priestess who healed him was innocent. The court has stripped him of his title and lands. He is to be made an example. Cross the court, and you lose everything. That's why they're so threatened by you, Darius said quietly, turning to Mira. Because your existence proves everything they built is a lie. That they're not the righteous protectors they claim to be. They're tyrants using dark magic to maintain power. We need to get this out, Thorn said urgently. Every territory needs to see. Alarms shrieked through the fortress. They'd been discovered. Move. Darius grabbed the journal and several other damning documents, shoving them into a leather satchel. Back in trance now. They ran. Footsteps thundered behind them as enforcers poured into the archives. Mira's lungs burned as they raced through corridors she couldn't navigate, trusting Darius's direction completely. They burst into a courtyard flooded with moonlight, and skidded to a halt. 50 court enforcers surrounded them, weapons drawn. At their center stood a figure Mira recognized from stories, High Magistrate Aldrich, the court's supreme authority. Ancient, powerful, and absolutely merciless. Lord Darius. Aldrich's voice was cultured silk hiding a blade. How disappointing. I had such high hopes for you once. Now you're nothing but a traitor protecting an abomination. The only abominations here are you and the corrupt system you protect. Darius moved slightly, positioning himself between Mira and the magistrate. I have the proof. Records from your own archives documenting the truth about the lunar priests. Every territory is going to see what you really are. Aldrich's expression didn't change. Those documents will burn with your body, as will the girl. His gaze slid to Mira with cold calculation. Though I admit, I'm curious. Is she truly worth dying for? Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. How touching. Aldrich raised his hand. Kill them all. Recover the documents. Leave no witnesses. The enforcers moved as one. And Mira made a choice. She stepped around Darius, ignoring his snarl of protest, and let her power explode outward. Silver light flooded the courtyard, so bright it turned night into day. Every enforcer stumbled back, shielding their eyes. But Mira wasn't attacking them. She was reaching for something deeper. Her power spread like roots through the stone beneath her feet, connecting to every Lycan in the fortress. She felt them, hundreds of life forces, some corrupted by dark magic, others clean. And she could see the curses. The binding spells. The control mechanisms the court had woven through bloodlines over centuries. Just like she'd done with Darius's curse, her power recognized the corruption. And began to purge it. All of it. At once. Across the fortress, Lycans gasped as bindings they'd carried their whole lives suddenly shattered. Dark magic that had suppressed rebellious bloodlines dissolved. Curses that had kept certain lords weak and compliant burned away. Aldrich's face twisted with fury. Stop her. Stop her now. But it was too late. The court's web of control was unraveling, and every Lycan they'd ever bound could feel it breaking. Mira collapsed, her power exhausted, bleeding from her nose and ears. But through blurring vision, she saw enforcers lowering their weapons. Saw confusion replace blind obedience on their faces. Saw realization dawn as they understood what had just been done to them. What had been done to them their entire lives. Darius caught Mira before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her with devastating gentleness. You brilliant, insane woman, he breathed. Did it work? She whispered. See for yourself. 50 enforcers stood in the courtyard, staring at their hands. At each other. At the high magistrate who'd commanded their blind loyalty through magic they'd never known existed. One by one, they lowered their weapons. And turned them toward Aldrich. The trial of the Lycan court took place under a full moon 3 weeks later. Not in the court's fortress. That corrupt seat of power had been abandoned, its dark magic purged by Mira's power and teams of volunteers who'd spent days cleansing centuries of accumulated rot. Instead, the gathered lords assembled in neutral territory, the ancient meeting grounds where the first Lycan council had convened over 1,000 years ago. Open air. Moonlight. No walls to hide behind. Mira stood beside Darius on the raised platform, wearing not servant's clothes, but a dress of silver silk that caught the moonlight like liquid starlight. Her hand rested in his, their bond humming between them, stronger now, settled, right in a way that still took her breath away. Across from them, High Magistrate Aldrich knelt in silver chains that suppressed his power. Around him, 6 other court officials who'd participated in the conspiracy. Their faces ranged from defiant to terrified as they faced judgment from the very lords they'd once controlled. Lord Jareth of the Eastern Territory stood as primary adjudicator, a massive Lycan with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. He held the leather journal they'd recovered from the archives, its damning contents now copied and distributed to every territory. The evidence is irrefutable. Jareth's voice carried across the silent gathering. The court conspired to murder an entire bloodline not for heresy, but to hide their use of dark magic. They used binding spells and curses to control noble houses for centuries, to suppress dissent, to maintain power through fear and manipulation. He looked directly at Aldrich. How do you answer these charges? Aldrich's lips curled. I answered that we did what was necessary. The territories were fractured, warring. The court brought order through strength. If that required certain measures, then so be it. We created peace. You created slavery. Darius's voice cut through the night like a blade. You bound bloodlines against their will. Cursed children who couldn't defend themselves. Murdered healers whose only crime was exposing your corruption. And you would throw away centuries of stability for one girl? Aldrich's gaze slid to Mira with pure venom. For an abomination whose very existence threatens everything we built? Everything you built was a lie. Mira's voice rang clear, and she felt every eye turn to her. Strange, how 3 weeks ago she would have cowered under such attention. But she'd faced enforcers and dark magic and her own terrifying power. A crowd held no fear anymore. I'm not an abomination, she continued. I'm what my bloodline was always meant to be, a healer. A balance to power that grows too corrupt. You feared us because we could undo what you'd done. Could free the people you'd enslaved. She stepped forward, and Darius moved with her, a united front. But here's what you never understood, Mira said softly. Power built on fear and control will always crumble eventually. Because the moment people realize they're stronger together than they are afraid, you lose everything. Silence hung in the moonlit air. Then Lord Jareth struck his staff against the stone platform 3 times. The sound echoed like thunder. The council finds the accused guilty of conspiracy, murder, and the unlawful use of dark magic against their own people. The sentence is permanent exile, their powers bound, their titles stripped. They will live out their days as the lowest rank they once despised, knowing the world they built has rejected them completely. Aldrich's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. All of you. Without the court's control, the territories will tear themselves apart. Then we'll build something better. Darius's voice carried absolute conviction. A council that serves rather than rules. That protects rather than enslaves. And if we fail, at least we'll have failed trying to do something right. The gathered lords erupted into discussion, some approving, others uncertain. But Mira saw hope on more faces than fear. Saw the possibility of real change taking root. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days. Blackstone Palace transformed into something Mira had never seen. Not a fortress, but a home. Music filled the courtyards. Laughter echoed through halls that had known mostly silence and discipline. Lords from allied territories mingled with servants, the old hierarchy softening as the truth of the court's manipulation became clear. Mira found Lily in the kitchens on the second day, flour dusting her copper curls as she kneaded bread with infectious enthusiasm. There you are. Lily abandoned her dough to pull Mira into a fierce hug. I've barely seen you since everything happened. Gods, Mira, or should I call you Lady Mira now? Are you actually going to be our lady? Because the whole palace is placing bets. Lily. Mira laughed, extracting herself from the embrace. Slow down. Breathe. Right. Breathing. I can do that. Lily grinned. But seriously, you and Lord Darius. The way he looks at you makes every romance story I've ever heard sound boring by comparison. Heat flooded Mira's cheeks. It's complicated. Complicated? You freed half the territories from dark magic curses, exposed the court's conspiracy, and made the scariest Lycan Lord in the north look at you like you hung the moon. That's not complicated, that's legendary. Before Mira could respond, familiar footsteps approached. She felt Darius through the bond before she saw him, his presence wrapping around her like warmth. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking thoroughly out of place among the flour and copper pots. But his eyes found Mira immediately, and the softness in them made her heart stutter. I need to steal you, he said. If you're done chatting. Lily made an exaggerated shooing motion. Go. Before I die from the romantic tension in my kitchen. Mira let Darius lead her through the palace and up to the eastern solarium, the same place they'd first truly spoken. But it looked different now. The windows were open to the warm evening air, and someone had filled the space with night-blooming jasmine that perfumed everything with sweetness. "What's this?" Mira asked softly. A question. Darius turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost nervous. Or maybe a request. I'm not entirely sure which. He took her hands in his, and the bond hummed between them, steady now, no longer wild and confusing, but settled and right. 3 weeks ago, you walked into my palace pretending to be someone you weren't, he said, hiding from a past that terrified you. And somehow, in the chaos and danger that followed, you became the most important thing in my world. Mira's throat tightened. Darius. Let me finish. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You've seen me at my worst. You've healed my curse, fought beside me, challenged me when I was being an arrogant ass. You've made my wolf settle in ways I didn't know were possible. And He paused, searching for words. I want forever with you, he finally said. Not because of the mate bond, though that's part of it. But because you're brave and kind, and you make me want to be better than the ruthless lord everyone fears. You make me want to build something worth protecting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple silver with a moonstone that caught the light like captured starfire. Marry me, Mira. Not as a servant or as a lunar priest or as anyone but exactly who you are. Be my mate, my partner, my equal in everything. Tears blurred Mira's vision, but she was smiling so hard her face hurt. Yes, God's yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and the moment it settled into place, silver light pulsed between them, her lunar power and his alpha dominance recognizing and completing each other. Then he kissed her, soft and deep and full of promises about futures they'd build together. 6 months later, Mira stood in the same solarium, now transformed for the bonding ceremony. Every allied territory had sent representatives. The space overflowed with flowers and moonlight and hope for what the new council might become. But Mira barely noticed any of it. She only saw Darius, waiting at the altar in ceremonial black, his eyes burning gold as she walked toward him. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional, perfect. But the moment that mattered most came after, when they stood alone on the balcony under a full moon, his arms wrapped around her from behind, both of them looking out at the territories they'd helped free. Thank you, Mira whispered. For what? For seeing me. When everyone else saw a servant or a threat or a secret to hide, you saw me. Darius pressed a kiss to her temple. That's because you're extraordinary. Even when you were trying desperately to be invisible. I'm still figuring out how to be extraordinary, she admitted. How to use this power. How to help rebuild what the court destroyed. We'll figure it out together. His arms tightened around her. That's the whole point of forever. And standing there in the moonlight, Mira finally believed it. She'd spent her whole life running, hiding, terrified of being seen. But being seen by Darius, being loved by him, had taught her something crucial. She wasn't meant to hide. She was meant to shine. Wow. If this story grabbed your heart and didn't let go, please leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. Was it when Mira's power first exploded? When Darius declared war for her? The kiss? The proposal? I want to know. And if you loved this journey, subscribe so you never miss another epic romance. Hit that notification bell because next week's story is going to be just as addictive. Thank you so much for being here, beautiful souls. Until next time, keep believing in love that's worth fighting for.